To improve JCR feedback, I think we need to make more of a point of the anonymous posting system. I don't know about you, but I didn't even know it existed until a few weeks ago. However, I feel it is a great system for you to be able to make your views heard by the exec and by the chairman. Also, I think that we should hold more regular sessions for people to come and question the exec on what's going on in college, and just be able to get feedback from that. In terms of the wider university, I want to represent Castle and your views at PresCon. I want to push your views into the wider university. I want to do this with an active approach. However, I know it's very difficult because the university often doesn't like to listen to the students. One way I think we can do this very well, as I mentioned previously, is the National Student Survey, where you can put your feedback into a survey and it will affect where Durham comes in rankings. And that means the university will listen to your feedback for once. Also, if the university really doesn't listen, I think it's always important to bear in mind what media and sources of press we have here in Durham, whether it's internal newspapers or maybe go out externally into the wider world, sort of local ITV or BBC channels, to make your points heard. So I think it's all about empowering your feedback and your opinions.
So throughout my manifesto and throughout my campaigning, I have been really emphasising the power and the importance of social media. So in terms of JCR involvement, I want to create a bi-weekly senior student and vice senior student blog, whose link will be shared and pinned to the top of Castle Freshers page, which will essentially outline events that have been happening both within the JCR and externally. On top of this, I think the problem in terms of representation outside the JCR is that the main channel by which the JCR president communicates with the university is through PresCon. However, there's currently problems, having spoken to Henry Beckley, with the fact that we have a sabbatical chairman who is perhaps, a bit of an older student, a bit out of touch with what's going on a ground level. So something that I would be looking to do, and I've already spoken to members of the Hatfield JCR and also the St Chad's JCR, is to create some form of Bailey Alliance. Essentially, even if this was not recognised officially by the university, this would create a greater platform that within PresCon, the sabbatical chair will have to listen. How much of this is actually achievable and implemented, I can't promise that it will solve all the problems and change the world, and it will be something that will have to be done by trial and error. But I think what I'm trying to stress here is that there are ways that we can look at more radical action and more collective action with JCRs that share very similar interests as us and whose interests need protecting, that perhaps organisations like PresCon and the DSO aren't listening to right now.
Thank you very much. We're opening it up to the floor now. Officially, there was one email sent in, so I'll quickly ask that on behalf of Sunita. How do you plan to deal with the accommodation issues faced by livers in and livers out regarding excessive costs and general housing shortages?
So one of the main points of my manifesto was establishing an accommodation committee. I'd want representatives from the blocks around Castle, as well as livers out representatives. I think this is a great opportunity for people to be able to feedback their views on the problems of accommodation in Durham. I mean, the exec can give their views to the university and college office, but most of them live on NG, and that's not entirely representative of where most of the students live in Castle. So I think it would be great to get a whole range of opinions in order to tackle accommodation issues. It will also provide us with information on where we stand on the Ripped Off campaign. Personally, I'm all for it, but that doesn't matter if you're not. So I'd like to see where you stand on these issues, and we can use the feedback of everyone else in order to push change and improve the accommodation we have here in Castle. Furthermore, I see opportunities of this accommodation committee to interact with the new green spaces initiatives that I think Izzy and Clara are pushing. This means we can improve what our accommodation is like here within Castle. Also, I think it would be great that we are in the process of developing more social spaces, for example in Bailey Court, for people to enjoy. And hopefully these will be available for everyone for years to come.
So, regarding accommodation, I've spoken to Edo about it when I canvassed him, and the reality is that it is not within the JCR's jurisdiction to renovate or to do up any accommodation. Fundamentally, all accommodation belongs to the university, and so any funding or any plans to do up be it Court, be it Moatside, or any other places is not within the JCR's capacity. So whether or not it involves looking at kind of current finances and lobbying the university, I agree with the issue of transparency. I would want to work alongside things like Prescom to truly understand where our 8,000 odd pounds is going and where it's being spent. And to make sure that kind of if there is money in the bank for renovations, that we put forward a good case for getting that funding. But ultimately, again, this is something that is beyond an individual JCR president's hand and ultimately falls into what the wider university decides to do. I actually never really considered it until the other candidates brought it up, but I do think an accommodation committee is a brilliant idea. I think it's a great way to channel complaints and issues to the services manager, who can address things that the services manager is within their capacity to address. So fundamentally, what my issue surrounding accommodation fees and prices involves is taking it on a wider university level, perhaps looking at more radical action if the university is unwilling to negotiate or to be transparent. So there have been talks about things like cancelling post-offer holder days, again, as Ruth has mentioned, contacting the press, because fundamentally, having gone to a state school in Essex, I truly understand that accommodation prices are, blocking students out from accessing higher level education. And on a personal level, it's something that I feel is absolutely abhorrent. And I can't believe that there isn't more of a wider university discussion about how we're letting students down, especially those from lower income backgrounds.
I've already mentioned how I think the kind of the distance between college and Kepi Court is an issue of accommodation, so I won't go into too much detail with that. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that when I come back and live in next year, it's going to be around £450 dearer than when I did it just 2 years ago, which is not remotely in line with national inflation, and it's even more not in line with the North East inflation rate. So I'd like to say, why is the university putting rent up so much if we're not actually getting anything out of it? I absolutely agree the ripped-off campaign is right to be doing what they're doing, but it's very clear it's not getting anywhere. The university is starting to listen, but at the end of the day, they're not going to listen to anything any student says, because all they're thinking about is the money. So I want to challenge the university and say, if you're going to put the rent up, we need to see things changing for that. So it's not the job of the JCR, it's not the job of the services manager to renovate the Lakeside gym, to make sure we've got a working laundry room with more than one working dryer. That's the job of the university. If they're going to be putting the rent up, we need to be seeing change for that. It's not okay that people living in Moatside this year have had no hot water for periods of time, no Wi-Fi, in fact they've got lights plugged in on the floor in the corridor. That's not the JCR's job, it's not the president's job, that's the job of the university and the amount of rent we're paying. With regards to the expansion, 4 to 6 colleges in 10 years is absolutely ridiculous. Again, the university aren't going to listen to that. They're not going to listen to students saying we don't like this. So all we can do is challenge them and say, make sure you put the study spaces in. Make sure you put the sports spaces in. Make sure you're giving everyone a good chance of having a brilliant time at Durham. If you're going to expand, make sure you're putting the facilities in. Because there at the moment, as you all know, there isn't the study spaces, and there isn't going to be that space if they put in another 4 to 6 colleges over 10 years.
Thank you, and I would like to open it up to the floor more officially.
What would you say are your strongest qualities which will allow you to carry out the role of senior student and to achieve your goals for the JCR successfully, and why?
Zip.
Wow. So personally, I would say a really strong quality of mine that is important in what is a very tenuous time in both the university and the JCR is to be approachable. I would like to think that I'm a smiley face. I would like to think that I say hello to everyone as I walk past, and I think that it's important when you have an expanding student body that your JCR president truly is a figure of inclusivity and diversity and being a bit dynamic. And I think if I had to sum myself up, I think I would think that I'm all those. On top of that, I think my work with Planto this year has shown that I, despite my bubbly exterior, am highly organised, highly motivated and very good at time management. I worked alongside Edo, I worked alongside Aiden at times, despite there being a few tears along the way, to put on what was, I think, a very good show. And I think even though that was a minor college event, I think that's very evidence of the fact that I'm capable of working alongside a college office. I'm capable of gathering support in the JCR and also making sure that I do my degree at the same time, which has been a struggle at times, I have to admit, but yeah, I have done my degree, so thumbs up from Dad.
Thank you, Maddie, for the question. I'll try and interpret what I think you're asking. To me, if you see my manifesto, you'll see I've split it into three parts. Within the JCR, within the wider college, and then within Durham as a university. Thanks, Angus. And to me, that sums up that I think I've grasped the role of senior student and senior man quite well. The fact that obviously you've got to represent your JCR, but you're also, like Zoom Group mentioned previously, dealing with Prescom and the DSU and the DSO on a wider uni level. So within the JCR, the issues I've already mentioned, we talked about quite a lot, they're crucial to me. Within the college, things that we've not mentioned yet are the SCR mentor scheme. I think that's really crucial. Not only does it give you interaction with the MCR and SCR you might not have, but it also gives you academic support that you don't have in your department, but is within your college, and that's something that I think isn't pushed enough, so I really want to push that. And then within the wider uni, I'd like to think I'm representing students well by saying the expansion and the rent costs aren't approved by students. I'm sorry if I've disagreed with you there, but to me, that is an absolute kind of massive push of mine that we need to make sure we fight this expansion and fight this rent cost because it's absolutely ridiculous.
I think a lot of the role in senior students is about building and maintaining relationships and also communicating with people at the right level. Whether you're being approachable to a brand new fresher or whether you're actually at the table with the Pro-Vice-Chancellor, you need to get the tone and the communication right. I hope that I have sufficient communication skills for this. I've had the opportunity to develop these through training with the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, the National Theatre, the BBC and ITV. And I feel that that will really help me to pitch things at the right level for whoever I'm dealing with. Also, leadership and teamwork is really important. You need to be able to lead an exec in college, but you have to appreciate how important teamwork is and listening to everyone's opinions in a team. You need to be able to take on board feedback from around the college and be able to act upon that. I hope my experience of leadership as president of the Durham Public Speaking Society, as president of the International Committee here in Castle, and as the captain of the Castle running team, will hopefully give me those leadership skills that are required from a role such as this. Organisation is also key. You have to balance a role such as this alongside your degree. And if you're not organised, then so much could go wrong in the JCR. At the moment, I do currently over 10 extracurricular activities alongside my degree. And it has been difficult getting that balance, but it shows I have strong communication skills in order to be able to fulfil a position like this on the exec. And I look forward to working with everyone in the exec in a position such as this.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience? I think, Edo, you're first up there. Sorry.
So as you know, the JCI is part of the Durham Student Organisation Framework. With the review of the DSO framework coming up this year, is there anything about the framework that you'd like to change and why?
Charlie.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Edo. I think the Durham Student Organisation Framework is something that can be worked with and something that is beneficial if done right. And I think that at the moment it's okay, and with a review there could be a lot more work to be done. I think there could be a lot more support for JCR execs and JCR members, as well as different people on different committees. For example, the FREP team, we had some active bystander training, and other trainings like that, active listening training, but I think there's so much more training that could be delivered, and the DSO could be delivering that training and passing that down, paid for by the university, and really making sure committees within college are actually being provided with the information, the skills, and kind of like the mindset they need to be able to run things. Frepping teams, for example, but also the bar staff, other committees in college, the international committee. With that extra training, it can really benefit the members of the JCR who could potentially be in dire need, and speaking to someone with that training could really help them.
So the